My name's Ethan. I'm 24 and I fix cars for a living. It's not the kind of job that gets you a corner office or a fancy title, but it keeps the lights on and the fridge stocked. I live in a creaky old house just outside Portland, Oregon, the one my parents left me after they passed in a car accident 6 years ago. It's nothing special. Peeling paint a porch that groans underfoot and a garage out back where I spend most of my nights tinkering with junker cars, I swear I'll restore someday. The neighborhood's quiet, the kind where people mow their lawns on Saturdays and wave if they catch your eye, but I keep to myself. Always have. It's easier that way. Most days blur together. I wake up throwing a flannel and jeans, head to the shop where I wrestle with oil leaks and busted transmissions, then come home to a microwave dinner and the hum of a radio playing old rock tunes. I'm not complaining, it's a life and it's mine. But sometimes when the house is too still, I can almost hear the echo of my parents' voices or the way the place used to smell like mom's cooking. That's when I head to the garage, crank up the music, and lose myself under the hood of a '78 Chevy that hasn't run in years. It's my way of keeping the quiet at bay. That night was no different, or so I thought. It was late November, the kind of cold that sneaks into your bones, and a steady rain had been drumming against the roof since dusk. I was in the garage, hands greasy, wrestling with a stubborn bolt on the Chevy's engine block. The radio was halfway through a Springsteen song, and the single bulb overhead flickered like it was about to give up. It was pushing 11 p.m. when I heard a faint knock at the front door. I froze, wrench still in hand. Nobody knocks on my door, especially not this late. For a second I thought I'd imagined it, but then it came again, softer, almost hesitant. I wiped my hands on a rag, turned down the radio, and stepped out into the rain. The porch light cast a weak glow across the front yard, catching the sheen of wet grass. I opened the door, and there she was. A girl maybe my age stood shivering under the overhang. Her dark hair was plastered to her face, soaked through, and her thin jacket was streaked with mud, clinging to her like a second skin. She didn't have a bag, no umbrella, nothing. Just her looking like she'd been through hell. "Sorry," she said, her voice small but steady despite the chatter of her teeth. "I know it's late, but can I come in for a bit? I got lost and my phone's dead." I blinked, caught off guard. She didn't look dangerous, but I'm not the guy who just lets strangers waltz into his house. Still, her eyes, wide, brown, and raw with something like fear, held me there. They weren't begging, not exactly, but they carried a weight I couldn't ignore. Yeah," I said, stepping aside. "Come in. You're soaked." She nodded, brushing past me into the living room. The air smelled of rain and damp cloth as she stood there, dripping onto the hardwood. I grabbed a clean towel from the bathroom and handed it to her. "Here, dry off. I'll get you something warm." "Thanks," she said, wrapping the towel around her shoulders. Her fingers trembled as she clutched it tight. I headed to the kitchen, put a kettle on, and dug out a box of chamomile tea I hadn't touched in years. While the water boiled, I glanced back at her. She was looking around, taking in the faded wallpaper, the mismatched furniture, the stack of car magazines on the coffee table. "Nice place," she said, and I could tell she meant it even if it wasn't true. "I'm Ethan," I said, leaning against the counter. "You got a name, Sophie," she replied, meeting my eyes for the first time. "And yeah, I know I look like a drowned rat." "Long story," I raised an eyebrow, pouring the tea. "Got time for it?" She gave a small laugh, the kind that's more relief than humor. "Maybe. Short version, I was hitching a ride back to college, University of Oregon. I'm a senior there. Guy driving got the wrong idea. We argued and he kicked me out a few miles back. Didn't realize it was this far from anywhere." She paused, sipping the tea I handed her. "I saw your light on. Figured it was my best shot." I nodded, processing. "That's rough. You're okay, though? He didn't hurt you or anything?" "No," she said quickly. "Just scared me. And left me in the rain." I pointed her to the old gas heater in the corner. "Sit there. Warm up." She shuffled over, still clutching the towel, and sank into the armchair. The heater hummed to life, casting a soft orange glow across her face. For the first time, I noticed she was pretty, not in a loud, made-up way, but quiet, like she didn't know it herself. Her eyes flicked up to mine. "You live here alone?" "Since I was 18, I said, keeping it short. "Parents passed, car accident, I'm used to it." Her face softened, and for a second I thought she might say something sympathetic, but she didn't. Instead, she just nodded like she understood more than she let on. You're kind of a saint for this, you know. I snorted, grabbing a blanket from the couch. Hardly. Just don't like seeing people freeze. I tossed the blanket to her. You can crash on the sofa tonight. I'll drive you to a bus stop in the morning. She pulled the blanket around her, her shoulders relaxing. Thanks, Ethan. I mean it. I didn't think I'd feel safe tonight. I shrugged, turning off the kitchen light. Get some rest. As I headed to my room, her voice stopped me, soft as the rain outside. Ethan. I'm glad it was your door I knocked on. I didn't turn around, just nodded. Yeah, me too. The next morning I woke up to the smell of rain still lingering in the air, the kind that sticks to everything even after the storm's passed. The house was quiet except for the faint creak of the floorboards as I shuffled to the kitchen. I glanced at the sofa where Sophie had slept, half expecting her to be gone like she'd been in some kind of fever dream. But there she was, curled under the old blanket, one arm tucked under her head, breathing soft and steady. My hoodie dwarfed her, the sleeves bunched up around her wrists. For a second, I just stood there watching the morning light filter through the blinds and catch the edges of her dark hair. Then I shook it off and started the coffee maker. The hiss of the machine must have woken her because she stirred, blinking against the light. Morning, she said, her voice scratchy but warm. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, the blanket pooling around her waist. You always up this early? Habit, I said, pouring 2 mugs of coffee. Shop opens at 8. You take cream or sugar black's fine, she said, standing and stretching. She padded over to the kitchen, still in my hoodie, her bare feet soft against the hardwood. Smells good. You do this every day, pretty much. I handed her a mug and pulled out a loaf of bread and some eggs from the fridge. Not much of a chef, but I can manage eggs and toast. You hungry? Her eyes lit up and she nodded. Starving. I owe you big time for this. We sat at the small kitchen table eating scrambled eggs and slightly burnt toast. The silence wasn't awkward, just easy, like we'd done this before. She asked about the garage, how I got into fixing cars. I told her about dropping out of community college when I was 18 after my parents died, and taking over their house to keep it from being sold. It's not much I said, gesturing at the chipped paint on the walls. But it's home. Sophie listened, her fork paused halfway to her mouth. That's heavy, Ethan. Losing them so young, and you just kept going. Didn't have much choice, I said, shrugging. What about you? You said you're at U of O, art major, right? Yeah, she said, her voice softening. Painting mostly. My parents think it's a waste of time. They've got this whole plan for me. Business school, corporate job, the works. They're intense. Everything's mapped out except what I actually want. She looked down at her plate, tracing the edge with her fork. Being here even just for a night feels like I can breathe. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. After breakfast, I grabbed my keys. Come on, I'll drive you to the bus stop. You'll be back at school by noon. The drive was short, just 10 minutes through wet streets lined with evergreens. Sophie stared out the window, her fingers tapping the edge of her mug, which she'd insisted on bringing along. We talked about small things, her favorite painter, some guy named Rothko, my love for rebuilding old engines, the way Portland rain never seems to let up. At the bus stop, she turned to me, her brown eyes catching the gray morning light. Hey, Ethan. What if I came back? Not because I'm lost or anything, just to talk more. Would that be okay? I laughed, caught off guard. You want to hang out at my falling apart house again? She grinned, a real one this time, not the tired smile from last night. Yeah, I kinda do. I'd say I'll stock up on tea, I said, leaning against the truck. Don't make it a habit, though. I'm not running a motel. She laughed, stepping out. Deal. But as she walked toward the bus, I felt something shift in my chest, like a gear slipping out of place. The truck felt too quiet on the drive back, and when I got home, the sofa looked emptier than it should have. That weekend, she showed up again. I was in the garage, elbow deep in a carburetor, when I heard a knock. There she was, holding a paper bag from a bakery in town. Thought you might like donuts, she said, her jacket dotted with rain. Got any more of that tea? I wiped my hands on a rag, grinning despite myself. You're gonna bankrupt me with all this tea drinking. She laughed and followed me inside, and just like that, it started. She came back the next weekend, then the one after that. She'd sit on a stool in the garage watching me work, asking questions about spark plugs and oil filters. I taught her how to change a tire, laughing when she got grease on her cheek. We made pancakes one morning and she burned half of them, blaming my crappy pan while I teased her about her cooking skills. Bit by bit, she opened up. Her parents owned a real estate company downtown and they expected her to join it after graduation. "They've got my life planned out to the minute," she said one night, curled up on the sofa with a mug. "What I study, who I should marry, where I should live. Out here with you, I feel like me, not their version of me." I looked at her the way the lamplight caught her face and felt something I hadn't in years. Not since before my parents died. Like the house wasn't just a place to sleep anymore, it was starting to feel alive. "You're always welcome here," I said, my voice quieter than I meant. "Long as you don't burn my kitchen down." She laughed, tossing a pillow at me. No promises. Those weekends became our thing. She'd show up with a sketchbook or a bag of takeout and we'd talk for hours about her art, my cars, or nothing at all. I started looking forward to the sound of her knock, the way her voice filled the empty corners of the house. I didn't admit it to myself, but I was starting to dread the moment she'd leave, each time the way the silence would creep back in when she was gone. The weeks slipped by and Sophie became a fixture in my life, like a song you don't realize you're humming until it's stuck in your head. The garage smelled of oil and rain, but now it also carried traces of her coffee grounds, the faint citrus of her shampoo, the sketchbook she left on my workbench. I'd catch myself smiling at nothing, thinking about her laugh, or the way she'd squint at a spark plug like it was a puzzle. I didn't call it anything, not out loud. It was just us filling the empty spaces in my house with something I hadn't felt in years. But I wasn't naive. She was a college kid from a world of money and plans, and I was a guy with grease under his nails and a mortgage on a falling-apart house. Whatever this was, it felt fragile, like a spark that could flicker out if I looked at it too hard. It was a Thursday late afternoon, and the rain was coming down in sheets, drumming against the garage roof like it wanted to break through. I was under the hood of a '65 Mustang, one of my pet projects, wrestling with a fuel line that wouldn't cooperate. The single bulb overhead buzzed, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. I heard the side door creak open, and there was Sophie shaking water off her jacket, holding 2 steaming cups of hot chocolate from the diner down the road. Her hair was damp, curling at the ends, and her cheeks were flushed from the cold. "Thought you could use a break," she said, setting the cups on the workbench. "It's a monsoon out there." I wiped my hands on a rag, grinning. "You walked through that just to bring me cocoa. You're gonna catch a cold." "Worth it," she said, hopping onto the stool she'd claimed as hers. She pushed one cup toward me, the steam curling up between us. "Besides, I like watching you work. You get this look like you're solving world peace or something." I laughed, taking a sip. The chocolate was rich, warming me from the inside out. "World peace is easier than this fuel line. You sticking around or just dropping off the goods?" She tilted her head, her brown eyes catching the light. "I'm staying. Unless you're kicking me out." "Never," I said too quickly. I turned back to the engine, hoping she didn't notice the heat creeping up my neck. We fell into our usual rhythm, her asking questions about the car, me explaining things I'd done 1,000 times, but somehow felt new when I told her. She leaned closer, pointing at a hose. "What's that one do, coolant?" I said, my voice steady despite her being close enough that I could smell the rain on her jacket. "Keeps the engine from overheating." "Like you," she said, her voice softer, now teasing, but with an edge I couldn't place. I looked up and her eyes were on me, not the car. The air shifted heavy, like the moment before a storm breaks. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. She slid off the stool, stepping closer, her boots scuffing the concrete. "Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never felt like this before. Not with anyone." My heart slammed against my ribs, like what I managed my throat tight, like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. She took another step, close enough now that I could see the raindrops clinging to her eyelashes. "Like I could stay here with you, and it'd be enough." I froze, the wrench still in my hand, the garage suddenly too small. Before I could process, she leaned in, her lips brushing mine, soft, hesitant but sure. It wasn't a movie kiss, no fireworks or slow motion. It was real warm, tasting faintly of chocolate and rain. I dropped the wrench, the clatter echoing as I kissed her back, my hands finding her waist. Time stopped just for a second and the world was nothing but her. When we pulled apart, her eyes were wide like she'd surprised herself as much as me. If I said I wanted to stay here forever, she whispered, what would you say? I swallowed, my hand still on her. I'd say you're crazy, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't want that too. My voice cracked and I laughed, trying to shake off the weight of it. Sophie, you're from a different world. Your parents, your life. How does this even work? She shook her head, her fingers brushing my jaw. I don't care about that. I care about this. About us. She paused, her eyes searching mine. Don't you? Yeah, I said, the word spilling out before I could stop it. More than I should. That night we didn't leave the garage. We sat on an old blanket, backs against the Mustang, talking until the rain slowed to a drizzle. She told me about the pressure at home, her dad's real estate empire, her mom's endless charity galas, the way they'd mapped out her life without asking her. I told her about the accident, how I'd stopped letting people in because losing them hurts too much. Somewhere in those hours we crossed a line. Not just the kiss, but something deeper, like we'd both decided to stop pretending this was just a fluke. When she fell asleep against my shoulder, I didn't move, didn't want to break whatever this was. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the quiet. Because it wasn't quiet anymore, it was full of her. The morning after the kiss, I woke up with Sophie still beside me, her head resting against my arm, the old blanket tangled around us on the garage floor. The rain had stopped, leaving a damp chill in the air, and the Mustang loomed over us like a silent witness. For a moment, I just watched her sleep, her face soft in the gray light filtering through the window. My chest felt full, like something had settled into place after years of being unmoored. I didn't want to move, didn't want to break the spell. But life doesn't let you stay in those moments forever. We got up, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table like nothing had changed. Except everything had. Her hand brushed mine when she reached for the sugar, and she smiled small and private, like we were sharing a secret the world didn't get to know. Last night was real, right? She asked, her voice quiet but steady. Yeah, I said, my thumb tracing the edge of my mug. Real as it gets. I wanted to say more, to ask what we were doing, where this was going, but the words stuck. She was still Sophie, college kid, art major, daughter of some big-shot real estate tycoon, and I was still just Ethan, the guy with a wrench and a house full of ghosts. But for those few days, it didn't matter. Then it all came crashing down. 3 days after the kiss, we were in the kitchen laughing over a botched attempt at pancakes. She'd flipped one onto the floor, and I was teasing her about her aim when I heard tires crunching on the gravel outside. I glanced out the window and saw a sleek black Mercedes polished to a mirror shine parked in my driveway. My stomach dropped. Nobody in this neighborhood drove a car like that. The doorbell rang sharp and demanding. Sophie froze, her spatula hovering over the pan. Who's that? She asked, but her voice had an edge like she already knew. I opened the door, and there stood a man in a tailored coat, his graying hair combed back, his eyes cold and assessing. He looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. I'm James Riley, he said, his voice clipped. Sophie's father. I believe my daughter's here. Sophie stepped into the living room behind me, her face pale. Dad, she said, barely above a whisper. How did your phone, he cut in, holding up a hand. The tracking app. You've been gone 3 days, Sophie. Your mother's worried sick. His gaze flicked to me, then back to her. Get your things. We're leaving. I stood there useless as Sophie grabbed her jacket from the couch. She wouldn't look at me, not really. Ethan's been good to me, she said to her father, her voice shaking. He helped me when I was stranded. Mr. Riley's eyes narrowed, taking in my grease-stained jeans, the cluttered living room. I appreciate you keeping her safe, he said, but his tone screamed that he didn't mean it. But this ends now. Let's go, Sophie. She hesitated, her eyes finally meeting mine. They were wet, full of something I couldn't name, regret, maybe, or defeat. I'm sorry, she whispered, so soft I almost missed it. Then she followed him to the car, her boots dragging against the floor. The Mercedes door slammed, and they were gone, taillights fading into the morning mist. The house felt wrong after that. Too big, too quiet. The coffee mug sat untouched on the table, hers still half full. The sofa smelled like her shampoo, and the garage still had her sketchbook on the workbench, a half-finished drawing of the Mustang staring up at me. I went to the shop, worked a double shift, tried to drown myself in oil changes and tire rotations, but it didn't help. Every creak of the house, every hum of the heater reminded me of her. 3 weeks passed with no word. No calls, no texts. She'd never given me her number and I didn't have hers. I wondered if her dad had taken her phone or if she'd just decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Either way, the emptiness settled in heavier than it had been before she knocked on my door. 3 weeks after Sophie left the house was back to its old self, too quiet, too empty, like it had never known her at all. I'd gone back to my routine shop by day, garage by night, the same Springsteen songs looping on the radio. But it wasn't the same. The coffee mugs were washed and put away, her sketchbook tucked in a drawer I didn't open, but the air still felt heavy with her absence. I'd catch myself staring at the front door, half expecting a knock that never came. I didn't know if she'd forgotten me or if her dad had locked her away in that polished world of theirs. Either way, I told myself to let it go. People leave. That's what they do. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind of damp November night where the rain doesn't fall so much as it hangs in the air, clinging to everything. I was in the garage, sanding rust off the Chevy's fender, the scrape of sandpaper loud against the quiet. The radio was off for once. I didn't want the noise. I was lost in the work when I heard it, a soft knock at the front door. My heart stopped just for a second because I knew that sound. I wiped my hands on my jeans, my pulse already climbing, and walked to the door. There she was. Sophie standing under the porch light, her dark hair damp and curling, her old jacket, the one from that first night, zipped up to her chin. No suitcase, no fancy car, just her holding a to-go cup of tea from the diner down the road. Her eyes met mine, and they were different this time, not scared or lost, but sure, like she'd made a choice and wasn't turning back. "Hey," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I brought tea. Figured you might be running low." I stood there frozen, like the world had hit pause. "Sophie," I said, my voice rougher than I meant. "What are you doing here?" She stepped closer, the porch creaking under her boots. "I'm sorry I left like that." No warning, no explanation. "I didn't want to." She paused, her breath visible in the cold air. "I told my dad everything. Not about us exactly, but about what I want. My life, my choices. He didn't take it well, but I'm done living for him. I want to be here. With you." I stared at her, the words sinking in slow. "You sure about this? Your family, your school. Portland's not your world, Sophie." She smiled, small but fierce. "It is now. I'm not running away anymore. I'm choosing this." She held up the tea, her eyes bright. "So you gonna let me in, or do I have to stand out here all night?" I laughed, the sound breaking the tension in my chest, and stepped aside. "Get in here." She walked past me, her shoulder brushing mine, and the house felt different the second she crossed the threshold. Warmer, fuller, like it had been waiting for her, too. We sat in the living room, her on the sofa, me in the armchair, the heater humming between us. She told me about the fight with her dad, how she'd stood her ground, refused to go to business school, and walked away from the life they'd planned. "He cut me off," she said, shrugging. "No trust fund, no fancy apartment. I've got a part-time job at an art supply store now, and I'm crashing with a friend at school. But I'm free, Ethan. For the first time, I'm free." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "And you came back here? To a guy with a half-broken house and a fridge full of leftovers?" She laughed, setting the tea on the coffee table. "Yeah, I did. Because you saw me when I was a mess and you didn't look away. Because this?" She gestured at the room. The chipped walls, the old furniture feels more like home than any place I've ever been. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't try. I just stood across the room and pulled her into my arms. She hugged me back tight, her face pressed against my chest, and for a moment we just stood there, the rain tapping the windows, the world outside forgotten. "You're not sleeping on the sofa this time," I said, my voice low. She pulled back, her eyes searching mine, a smile tugging at her lips. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that." That night we didn't talk about the future or make promises we couldn't keep. We just started right there in the quiet of my creaky old house. Over the next few weeks, Sophie moved in bit by bit, a sketchbook here, a toothbrush there, a stack of art books on the coffee table. We built a life not with grand gestures or fairy tale endings, but with small things. Coffee in the morning, her drawings taped to the fridge. My tools scattered next to her paints in the garage. I didn't know a stranger knocking on my door could change everything, but Sophie did. She wasn't just a girl who needed a place to crash. She was the one who made the silence go away, who turned a house into a home. Looking back, I realized it wasn't about the kiss or the nights we spent talking. It was about choosing each other every day, even when it was scary, even when the world didn't understand. Love doesn't always come with a plan or a promise. Sometimes it's just a knock in the rain, a chance you take a hand you hold when you could have walked away, and for us that was enough.